So an alternative to manually applying flat colors to 3D objects and giving the illusion of cel shading by utilizing material selections is by employing this handy technique using high contrast lights. So the one thing that I did with my materials is, instead of having everything loaded in the luminance channel and having the luminance channel activated, I just copied all of my colors and pasted them into my color channel here. So we have some diffuse shading. So you can see the difference, flat color and some diffuse shading. So that's what I did for each one of my materials. I just copied the colors from the luminance, pasted it into the color channel. And now if I turn on interactive render region, you'll see we have some diffuse shading back now. So now what we can do is start utilizing lights. So what I'm going to do is create an Omni light. And right now, everything just kind of went dark. And that's because our light is right inside of our Game Boy. So we just got to pull this guy out, pull the light out, and we'll just move it up to the top left over here. Go into our perspective view again. So you can see our light is, again, casting light as it does. And you can see this gradation from where the light is up here to the bottom here. It's kind of casting a brighter specular here and kind of falls off here. So what we want to do is get rid of that altogether. We want flat shading. So the first thing I actually want to do with this light is turn on some shadows, because with luminance materials, can't really apply any shadows, because that'd almost be like trying to cast a shadow on a fully lit light bulb. Just not going to happen. So what we can do is choose ray trace hard shadows, and what this is going to do is create some very hard shadows. You can see why we didn't choose soft, because that does not look 2D at all. So we're going to use hard, and there we go. And now we can kind of move everything around the scene here, and we have interactive shadows on our objects. So right now we still have some like gradation, we have some nice shading. It's not exactly flat. So what we want to do is go ahead and go into the details tab, and what we're going to do is crank up the contrast. And what this is basically going to do is really crunch the light and dark values in our scene via the light. And I'll just crank this up to, say, 200%. And you're going to see that that really got rid of that gradation, especially if you pay attention right here. So let me just redo that. So you can see the gradation, you can see some of the mid-tones, some of the grays, but if I add that contrast, that just kind of clamped everything, and now we have this really nice sharp shading, this nice 2D shading, because of that contrast in the details tab of our Omni light. So everything's fairly dark. You can't even really see the back part of our object. All the shadows are really dark as well. So what we're going to do to try to bring back some of our color is creating a second light. And we're just going to rename this Ambient Light. And ambient lights kind of work exactly like ambient lights in After Effects. It kind of just casts a flat color, flat light without any fall off or specular or anything like that. It's just a flat light source. So I'm just going to go here and enable ambient illumination on our ambient light. And you're going to see that that then brightens everything up, and we got some of the detail, some of the color of the back face of our Game Boy. We're getting some of the colors back as well. So none of those shadows are completely just stark black. We're getting some of the colors back in there. We can also go in here and kind of adjust the intensity of that ambient light. So say maybe that's a little bit too hot, maybe 85% is what we want. So there we go, adding a light with some ray trace hard shadows and some contrast in addition to the ambient light with just a little bit of intensity there. We created some flat shading on our 3D objects. So looking pretty good. So now we can actually take this one step further and make this composition look even flatter. And you're going to notice even in my viewport, we're getting this depth perspective. We're getting this vanishing point kind of view because we're using just the default camera view. What we want to do is totally remove that and make our composition even more representational of a 2D view. So what we can do is go ahead, and right now we're using a default camera because we have no camera in our scene, and we're just going to create a new camera, and we're going to look through it by clicking this little view finder there. So now we're actually looking through our camera, and if I go to the 4-up view, you can see there's our camera right there, and as I kind of orbit around here, holding the 3 key and clicking and dragging, just orbiting around our view, and that's moving our main camera. We have different projections or different camera views that we can then look through, and by default it is perspective, and this creates, you know, a typical camera view. We have some depth distortion, depth perspective, but what we want to do is just flatten that out and make our view a little bit more 2D and geometric looking. So we can do this one of 2 ways. We can do it using an isometric view. I like to call this the SimCity view if you're familiar with the old school game SimCity. But you'll notice that as I put this in view, and if I try to orbit by holding the 3 key and orbiting, our view is locked. And that's kind of the downside of isometric, is it's a fixed angle, but it gives you this really nice flat kind of view, and that's exactly what we're looking for. But we want some freedom to actually rotate and choose the angle of our camera. So the mode I like to use is actually parallel. So it's the same kind of thing, and you're gonna notice right away that we just sliced my Game Boy in half, and that's not good. So actually what's happening is you can notice that our camera is actually intersecting our geometry, and what this phenomenon is called clipping. And if we go into our details tab, we have clipping enabled. If we just turn that off, you'll see that our camera will no longer clip or cut into our geometry, and we can always turn that back on and just physically move our camera back in Z space, and that'll solve all those problems. But if you don't even want to run into that issue ever, just turn off that near clipping and we won't be slicing any of our Game Boy. So the nice thing about the parallel camera view is we get this really nice geometric flat kind of 2D view, but we can also freely orbit around and choose the exact angle we want to have our composition render in. So this is kind of the benefit of the parallel camera. You get all the flat kind of camera views that you would typically find in an isometric camera, but you have the freedom to navigate and orbit around and choose the exact angle you want. So by using basic materials with color channels enabled, as well as a omni light with hard shadows and some contrast, and then adding a second light with some ambient illumination, we quickly and easily applied a type of cel shading to the objects in our scene. And to even further add a flatter fieldwork composition, we added a parallel camera.